Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku fought alongside the Flash in the Speed Force War. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The air in Training Ground Gamma tasted of sweat, ozone, and victory. Izuku Midoriya, known to the world by the hero name Deku, hung suspended 50 feet above a street of foes' storefronts, the sensation of his float quirk a familiar, buoyant hum in the core of his being. It was a feeling akin to being submerged in water, a weightlessness that was both liberating and profoundly unnatural. Below, the skeletal, almost wraith-like form of Toshinori Yagi, the legendary All Might, watched with an eagle's focus, his voice crackling through Deku's earpiece. "Good, Midoriya, my boy! Your control over float has improved immensely. You're holding your position without drifting. Now, the transition. Remember what we discussed. Don't think of them as two separate quirks. Think of it as one fluid motion. Float gives you the position, Black Whip gives you the momentum. They are partners." Deku took a deep, steadying breath, the recycled air of the training dome filling his lungs. "Right," he muttered, his eyes scanning the urban jungle gym below. His target was a water tower on a building 3 blocks away. The goal wasn't just to get there, but to get there with the seamless grace of a pro. "On your mark," All Might's voice encouraged. "Channel the Force adaptability, the Seventh's heart. They are with you. They are you." Deku closed his eyes for a fraction of a second. He could feel them, the vestiges of One for All. It wasn't a cacophony of voices anymore, but a quiet, supportive presence, a bedrock of experience deep within his soul. He felt the collected will of 8 heroes before him, a legacy of hope that pulsed in time with his own heartbeat. He opened his eyes, determination hardening his features. One fluid motion. Now, the weightlessness of float vanished, replaced by the pull of gravity. For a heart-stopping second, he was just a boy falling from the sky. Then, with a grunt of exertion, he summoned Black Whip. Veins of dark, crackling energy erupted from his arms and back, not as wild, uncontrollable tendrils, but as focused, whip-like appendages. 2 of them shot out, unerringly, and latched onto the corner of a nearby building with a resounding thwump. Instead of swinging, he used them as anchors to kill his downward momentum and slingshot himself forward. The G-force pressed him back, a familiar strain. As he hurtled through the air, he was already targeting his next point. Another set of whips shot out, grappling a lamppost, altering his trajectory midair. He was a green and black comet, a living pinball ricocheting through the concrete canyon. "Excellent control, young Midoriya!" All Might's praise was a balm to his straining nerves. "You're not just swinging, you're vectoring. Your analysis is paying off." Deku allowed a small, breathless smile. He was getting it. The symbiotic dance between the quirks. He released the whips, letting his momentum carry him in a high arc towards the water tower. As he reached the apex of his trajectory, he reactivated float, killing his speed and allowing him to land with a soft, near-silent tap of his iron-soled boots on the rusted metal roof. He stood, chest heaving, a grin spreading across his face as he looked back at the distance he had covered. Green lightning, the signature of full cowling, flickered around him at a placid 8%. A comfortable thrum of power that now felt like a second skin. That was perfect!" All Might's voice was filled with a raw, paternal pride that made Deku's heart swell. "Your mastery of the individual quirks is one thing, but your ability to synergize them. Izuku, you are truly making this power your own." "I still have a long way to go," Deku replied, though he couldn't keep the elation from his own voice. "The transitions could be faster. I felt a half-second of hesitation before the first Black Whip launch." A raspy chuckle came through the comms. "And that is why you will be the greatest. Now let's try it again. This time, incorporate a 15% burst on the final launch. Let's see how you handle the added acceleration." Deku nodded, rolling his shoulders. He felt a familiar ache, the deep burn of using OFA, but it was a good ache. It was the feeling of growth. As he prepared to leap, a strange sensation prickled at the back of his neck. The air, which moments ago was sterile and still, now felt charged, heavy with static. The hairs on his arms stood on end. "All Might?" he said, his voice laced with sudden confusion. Do you feel that? Down in the control room, Toshinori frowned, his sunken eyes scanning the array of monitors. Feel what, my boy? All environmental readings are stable. No, it's something else. Deku looked up at the domed ceiling, where powerful lamps simulated a perfect afternoon sky. But the light seemed to be flickering, not like a faulty bulb, but like the very concept of light was stuttering. A faint, almost imperceptible smell reached him, a bizarre combination of ozone and burnt sugar. Then, the color came. It started at the apex of the dome, a pinprick of angry scarlet. It didn't spread like a liquid, it fractured. Jagged lines of crimson light, like cracks in reality itself, began to scrawl across the artificial sky. The simulated clouds began to curdle, moving in unnatural, geometric patterns that defied meteorology and physics. What in the... Toshinori breathed, pushing himself up from his chair, his bony hands gripping the console. On the screens, every sensor was going haywire. Temperature, atmospheric pressure, radiation, all of it was spiking into impossible, contradictory readings. Young Midoriya, get down from there! Evacuate immediately! That's not a system malfunction! Deku was already moving, his instincts screaming at him. The comfortable hum of float felt dissonant now, as if the very laws of physics it manipulated were being rewritten. He leaped from the water tower, intending to use Black Whip to lower himself safely. That's when the lightning struck. It wasn't lightning in any traditional sense. It was a solid bolt of the same scarlet energy, and it didn't flash, it tore. It ripped through the air with a sound not of thunder, but of shearing metal and tearing space-time. It struck the ground near the center of the training area, not with an explosion, but with a deafening silence that seemed to suck all sound from the dome. Where it hit, reality itself seemed to glitch. The fake asphalt flickered between its normal state, a patch of barren earth, and pure, terrifying static. A wave of vertigo washed over Deku. He felt a profound sense of temporal dislocation, as if he were simultaneously in the past, present, and a future that should not exist. The whispers of the vestiges in his mind turned into a chorus of alarm, a frantic, overlapping jumble of warnings. Then the sky broke. The scarlet cracks converged, and with a final, soul-shaking shriek of tearing reality, a hole opened in the ceiling of the dome. It was not a physical hole, but a wound in the world, a swirling vortex of impossible colors, dominated by that violent, bleeding red. It exerted a pull, not just on his body, but on his very essence. It was a cosmic vacuum, and he was at its event horizon. Black Whip! He roared, firing a dozen tendrils in every direction, anchoring himself to buildings, to the ground, to anything solid. The dark energy groaned under the strain, the tendrils stretched taut as harp strings. He gritted his teeth, flaring full cowling to 20%, his muscles screaming in protest as he fought against the inexorable pull. Midoriya! All Might's voice was a raw scream of terror, the voice of a father watching his son being dragged into an abyss. Deku could see him on a monitor inside the control room, his skeletal form silhouetted against the blaring red alarms, his face a mask of utter horror and helplessness. The pull intensified. It felt like it was peeling him apart, layer by layer. His connection to the vestiges flickered. The sensation of float sputtered and died. One by one, his Black Whip anchors snapped, not from the force, but because the very objects they were attached to began to dissolve into the chaotic energy. The last anchor broke. Deku was weightless again, but this was not the gentle buoyancy of float. This was the terrifying helplessness of being utterly untethered from existence. As he was pulled upwards, into the screaming scarlet maw, his eyes locked with All Might's. He saw the desperation, the fear, the reflection of a promise being broken. That gaunt, horrified face was the last thing he saw of his world. Then, everything was red. The transition was not a journey. It was an unmaking. Izuku was subjected to a sensory onslaught that defied description. He was a stream of consciousness being poured through a sieve of infinity. He saw glimpses of moments that were not his own, a man in a yellow suit vibrating with hatred, a city dissolving into a white wave of antimatter, a cosmic treadmill at the dawn of time, a family murdered in a flash of lightning. These images were interwoven with his own memories, twisted and distorted. He saw Bakugo's sneer, but it was on his mother's face. He saw All Might smile, but it echoed with a sound of shattering glass. His very being felt stretched, compressed, and folded in on itself. The energy of One for All, his anchor and his weapon, flared wildly, a beacon of order in a sea of pure chaos, trying desperately to hold his atoms together. And then, as suddenly as it began, it was over. He was ejected from the storm with the force of a cannonball. The world resolved itself in a blur of motion before he slammed, with bone-jarring force, into something large, metal, and filled with refuse. The sound was a deafening crang, followed by the clatter of garbage. For a long moment, he lay there, embedded in a dumpster in a dark, wet alleyway, every cell in his body screaming. Pain was a welcome sensation. It was a sign that he was solid again. He groaned, pushing a soggy cardboard box off his face. His hero costume was tattered, singed at the edges, but mostly intact. He clumsily extricated himself from the dumpster, his legs shaky, and landed on the grimy asphalt. The air was thick with the smell of rain, rotting food, and something else, a faint, electric tang, like the storm had followed him here. He leaned against a brick wall, trying to get his bearings. His head throbbed. But it wasn't just a headache. His entire body felt strange. It was vibrating, a low-frequency hum that resonated deep in his bones. It felt as if he were a tuning fork that had just been struck. He looked at his hands. They seemed normal. He clenched a fist, and for a split second, the green lightning of full cowling that sparked around his knuckles was tinged with something else, a flicker of pure, brilliant gold. What was that? He pushed the thought aside, his hero training taking over. Assessed the situation. Where am I? The alley was unfamiliar. The architecture was different, less of the sleek, modern designs of Musutafu, more gothic and weathered, with ornate fire escapes clinging to the brickwork. He could hear sirens in the distance, but they had a different pitch, a mournful, two-toned wail that was alien to his ears. He stumbled to the mouth of the alley, peering out onto the street. It was a city, certainly. A massive one, with skyscrapers that speared a night sky choked with light pollution. But everything looked sharper. Hyperreal. He could see the individual stitches in the coat of a man walking on the opposite sidewalk. He could read the brand name on a cigarette but lying in the gutter 20 feet away. At the same time, the world felt unstable. A passing bus seemed to leave a faint, reddish afterimage in its wake. The neon signs across the street had a subtle, almost subliminal flicker, as if they were struggling to remain in this dimension. It was this combination of hyperclarity and fundamental instability that made his stomach churn. This wasn't Japan. He was almost certain this wasn't anywhere on his Earth. His spiraling thoughts were cut short by a flash of light so brilliant it was like a camera strobe going off directly in his eyes. A streak of pure crimson, interwoven with gold, shot past the end of the alley. It moved with impossible speed, accompanied by a sound like a controlled sonic boom. It was gone before his mind could fully process it. Faster than Ida. Faster than All Might in his prime. Before he could even begin to analyze what he'd just seen, it was followed by something else. Something horrifying. A shape, vaguely humanoid, materialized at the corner where the red streak had been. It was as if it were carved from television static and shadow. Its form was that of a runner, but it glitched and stuttered, its movements jerky and unnatural. It was wreathed in the same scarlet lightning he'd seen in the storm, but this lightning was corrupt, negative. It seemed to drain the color and life from the very air around it. It let out a low, corrosive hiss, a sound like dying radio waves, and then vanished in another burst of speed, chasing the red light. Then another appeared. And another. A small swarm of these things flickered into existence, their shadowy forms a blight on the hyperreal city. They were all drawn in the same direction, a pack of ethereal predators hunting their prey. Deku's blood ran cold. He didn't know what those things were, but he knew evil when he saw it. The air around them felt like despair. His duty as a hero was screaming at him, a clarion call that transcended dimensions. People could be in danger. He was about to step out of the alley when the crimson blur shot back in the opposite direction, now pursued by the pack of shadowrunners. This time, he got a better look. It was a man, clad in a sleek, crimson suit with a lightning bolt emblem on his chest. His face, visible in the cowl, was strained, beaded with sweat, his jaw clenched in exhaustion and grim determination. The man in red was a master of motion. He weaved through traffic, ran up the side of a building, and then launched himself across an intersection, a living thunderbolt. But the shadow creatures were relentless. They mirrored his movements, cutting him off, their corrupted energy leaving trails of decay in the air. The fight came directly towards Deku's alley. The red-suited man, the Flash, though Deku did not yet know his name, skidded to a halt just a few yards away, his boots barely making a sound. He was breathing heavily, his body vibrating with contained energy. "You can't have it," he panted, seemingly to the empty air. "The speed force belongs to the living." One of the shadow creatures, larger than the others, materialized directly in front of him. It raised a hand made of crackling, negative energy. "It belongs to the end," it hissed, its voice a collage of 1,000 dying whispers. Barry Allen was tired. He'd been fighting the echoes of the paradox for 3 days straight, running battle across Central City. They were manifestations of dead speedsters, their connection to the speed force corrupted and weaponized by the negative speed force. They were tireless, relentless, and their touch could sever a speedster's connection, or worse. He was running on fumes, his link to the speed force feeling strained and frayed. He saw the attack coming, but he was a fraction of a second too slow to react. He braced himself for the impact, for the soul-draining touch of the echo. But before it could land, something else happened. From the corner of his vision, in the alley he had thought was empty, a blur of green and black erupted. For Deku, it was pure instinct. He saw the man in red in danger, about to be struck by that terrifying monster. He didn't think. He didn't analyze. He acted. He pushed off the ground, activating One for All, full cowling at 15%. The effect was instantaneous and utterly bizarre. The moment OFA's power surged through him, it felt like he had dipped a live wire into a vat of gasoline. The ambient, vibrating energy of this place, the energy he'd been feeling in his bones, was siphoned into him, supercharging his quirk beyond all known limits. The green lightning that wreathed his body exploded outwards, now shot through with brilliant, golden-white sparks. The world didn't just slow down, as it usually did. It lurched, stretching and warping around him as he moved. He shot out of the alley, not with the intent of a full-power smash, but just to tackle the man in red out of the way. From Barry Allen's perspective, it was the most impossible thing he had ever seen. He existed in a world of nanoseconds. To him, normal humans were living statues. He could hold a full conversation in the time it took one to blink. But this boy, this kid in a ridiculous green bunny suit, he moved. It wasn't speed on his level, not even close to Wally's or Jay's. But it was coherent, controlled, and impossibly fast for someone who shouldn't have a connection to the speed force. From a standstill, the boy moved with the velocity of a fired bullet. It was like watching a photograph leap off the page. Deku's shoulder impacted Barry's chest, sending them both tumbling across the pavement, skidding to a halt behind a parked car just as the echo's attack passed through the space they had just occupied, striking the brick wall and causing it to decay into dust and static. Deku groaned, disentangling himself from the man in red. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice urgent. Barry stared at him, his mind racing faster than light. Who is this? Where did he come from? That energy, it felt like the speed force, but raw. Unrefined. Green. The kid's energy signature was like a bonfire in the middle of a dark forest, a massive, explosive release of kinetic potential that had no right to exist. And it was a beacon. As if on cue, all the echoes in the vicinity stopped their chase. Their shadowy, glitching heads all turned in unison, their non-existent eyes locking onto Deku. The low hiss they emitted grew in volume and intensity. They had found a new source of energy. A brighter one. A more delicious one. Deku scrambled to his feet, instinctively taking a defensive stance between the injured man and the approaching monsters. His body still thrummed with that wild, untamed power. He felt stronger than ever, but also dangerously unstable, like a bottle filled with too much pressure. "What are those things?" he yelled over his shoulder to the man in red. Barry got to his feet, his exhaustion momentarily forgotten, replaced by a surge of adrenaline and profound confusion. Echoes, he said, his voice grim. Corrupted speedsters. They're drawn to energy, and you just lit up like a Christmas tree in the middle of a blackout. The echoes began to converge on the alley, their shadowy forms blocking the only escape route. They glided over the ground, their feet not quite touching it, their numbers swelling as more of them flickered into existence from the surrounding blocks. They were a tide of hungry static and oblivion. Deku's heart hammered in his chest. He was in an unknown world, facing unknowable horrors, next to a man who could move faster than sound, and he was somehow the center of attention. It was terrifying, it was overwhelming, but he was a hero. He settled into his fighting stance, the green-gold lightning of his supercharged quirk crackling around him. He looked at the man in red, a stranger who was now, for all intents and purposes, his partner. He saw the exhaustion in the man's eyes, but also a flicker of something new, a desperate, calculating hope. Barry looked from the approaching horde to the impossible boy beside him. He didn't have time for 20 questions. He had time for one command. Whatever you just did, Barry Allen, the Flash, said, his voice cutting through the rising hiss of the echoes. Do it again! He settled into a runner's crouch, his own crimson lightning beginning to arc around him. And try to keep up, Barry Allen's command. Try to keep up was the most profound understatement Izuku Midoriya had ever heard. The world dissolved into a smear of color and sound. One moment, he was standing in a grimy alley, facing down a horde of nightmare creatures. The next, he was part of a kinetic storm, a passenger in a hurricane of red lightning. The Flash didn't just run. He unspooled reality in his wake. Buildings became streaks of gray and brown, streetlights blurred into lines of yellow-white, and the hissing of the echoes was a stretched, distorted drone that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Don't lock your knees! Barry's voice was a sharp, clear presence in the chaos, somehow perfectly audible despite the whirlwind. Stay loose! Absorb the impact with your whole body. Deku tried to obey, but his body was a foreign instrument. The 15% full cowling he'd activated felt less like a controlled output, and more like a contained explosion. The alien energy of this place, this speed force Barry had named, was pouring into One for All, and his quirk was greedily drinking it down, amplifying it into something wild and untamed. His feet, shod in their familiar iron-soled boots, hammered against the pavement with the force of jackhammers. He wasn't running on the asphalt so much as he was detonating small pieces of it with every step. An echo lunged from his left, its static-charged claws reaching for him. Deku reacted on pure instinct. He twisted, throwing a punch aimed at its head, but his perception of distance and speed was completely skewed. He overshot the target by a foot, his fist instead connecting with the brick wall of a building. The impact was cataclysmic. There was no satisfying crunch. There was a concussive boom and the wall simply atomized. A perfect, 5-foot crater of brick dust and shattered mortar erupted outwards. The recoil shot up Deku's arm, a painful, vibrating shock that made his teeth rattle. Whoa! Less smashing, more dashing! Barry yelled, appearing beside him in a flicker of crimson. He grabbed Deku's arm, his touch feeling strangely solid and grounding amidst the chaos. They're spectral. A direct punch won't do much. You have to disrupt the energy that holds them together. Think of it like trying to pop a bubble, not break a rock. Before Deku could process this, Barry had already spun, his arm a blur. He didn't punch the echo that was reforming from the dust cloud. Instead, he ran his hand through its center at super speed, his fingers vibrating at an insane frequency. The echo convulsed, its form glitching violently before it dissolved with a screech of fizzling static, like a television being unplugged. Like that, Barry said, already moving again. Disrupt, don't destroy. Deku's mind raced, trying to catch up to the torrent of new information. Vibrations. Disrupt the energy field. It's not about blunt force, it's about frequency. Physics. Or something like it. Another pair of echoes converged on him. This time, he didn't punch. He flared the power in his legs and leaped, soaring over their heads in a high, uncontrolled arc. As he flew over them, he channeled the raw, supercharged energy of OFA downwards through his legs, not as a kick, but as a focused blast of pure kinetic force. The air itself seemed to shudder. The two echoes below him wavered like heat haze, their forms destabilizing as the blast of pure motion washed over them. They flickered out of existence. It was messy. It was clumsy. But it worked. A triumphant grin flashed across Deku's face before he realized his trajectory was taking him straight towards the second-story window of a closed bookstore. "Oh, crud!" he yelped, pinwheeling his arms. A crimson streak intercepted him midair. Barry grabbed him around the waist, their momentum carrying them into a controlled run along the side of the building, defying gravity for 3 breathtaking seconds before they landed back on the street. "Okay, new plan," Barry said, not even breathing hard. He was weaving through the remaining echoes, a master artist painting with motion, his every move economical and precise. He'd phase through one, causing it to short-circuit. He'd create a small vacuum with a whirlwind of his arms, starving another of the energy it needed to maintain its form. "I'll draw their fire. You see that intersection up ahead?" Deku followed his gaze to a crossroads 100 yards away. The streetlights there were flickering ominously. "Yeah, when I give the signal, I want you to pour every ounce of that green lightning you have into one spot. Right in the middle of the intersection. Don't hold back. Can you do that?" "I think so," Deku shouted back, the idea of a focused, large-scale attack much more in line with his usual fighting style. "Good. On my mark. 3, 2. Barry became a living cyclone. He ran in a wide, ever-tightening circle, his speed generating a powerful vortex. The remaining dozen or so echoes were caught in the whirlwind, their spectral bodies pulled from their scattered positions and dragged towards the center of Barry's maelstrom. They were sucked together into a single, writhing mass of shadow and corrupted red lightning, right in the heart of the intersection. "Now, kid!" Barry roared. Deku didn't hesitate. He planted his feet, the asphalt cracking under the strain. He took a deep breath, channeling not just the power, but the will of the vestiges within him. For this world. To protect. He drew all the chaotic, crackling energy into his right arm, the limbs swelling with power. The green lightning intensified, shot through with those brilliant gold sparks, turning his arm into a beacon of emerald fire. "Delaware!" "Smash!" He flicked his fingers, unleashing the torrent of power not as a punch, but as a colossal, focused air cannon. A shell of pure, green-gold kinetic force shot down the street, striking the vortex dead center. The result was spectacular. The concentrated blast of OFA, supercharged by the speed force, met the vortex of corrupted energy. For a moment, the two forces battled, a chaotic storm of green and red. Then, the green won. The mass of echoes was blown apart, not just scattered, but utterly annihilated, their dying hisses swallowed by the concussive force of Deku's attack. The street fell silent. The air, which had been thick with malice and static, was suddenly still. Deku stood, his right arm throbbing, his entire body trembling from the exertion. He had never, ever unleashed that much power with a single flick. Barry skidded to a halt beside him, his eyes wide behind his cowl. He looked at the intersection, then back at Deku. A slow, incredulous smile spread across his face. "Okay," he said, his voice a mixture of awe and disbelief. "You are definitely not from around here." He clapped a hand on Deku's shoulder. "Come on. We need to get off the street before more of them show up. I know a place we can talk. Hold on tight." Before Deku could ask what he meant, Barry grabbed him, and the world ceased to exist. If their previous run was a hurricane, this was teleportation by way of lightning strike. There was no sense of motion, only a violent transition. A brief, blinding flash of crimson and gold, a sensation of every molecule in his body being pulled in one direction, and then, stillness. Deku stumbled forward, his stomach doing a nauseating flip. He blinked, trying to reorient himself. He was no longer on a rain-slicked street. He was in a vast, circular room, bathed in cool, blue light. A massive, star-shaped emblem was emblazoned on the floor. The walls were lined with monitors, computer consoles, and strange, esoteric pieces of technology that made his inner tech nerd's brain fizz with curiosity. Two figures were standing by a central console, and they both jumped as Barry and Deku materialized in a crackle of residual energy. One was a young man with long, dark hair and a t-shirt bearing the logo of a fictional space franchise. The other was a woman with auburn hair and kind, intelligent eyes, dressed in practical lab attire. "Barry! You're back," the woman said, her voice a mix of relief and concern. "Your vitals were all over the place." "And who's this?" The man's eyes widened, a huge, excited grin spreading across his face as he took in Deku's costume. "Whoa! Cosplayer? Did you pick up a stray at a con bar? That is a seriously committed bunnier aesthetic. I dig it. Cisco, Caitlin, Mita." Barry trailed off, realizing he didn't know Deku's name. "Deku," Izuku supplied automatically, before correcting himself. It felt wrong to use his hero name when he was so far from home. "I mean Midoriya. Izuku Midoriya." He gave a short, stiff bow, a gesture of politeness that was clearly lost on them. "Right. Midoriya," Barry said, pulling off his cowl. His face was flushed, his hair damp with sweat. "Things are complicated. He's not from here. And he's the reason I'm not currently a spectral shish kebab." Caitlin Snow's expression immediately shifted from curious to professional. Her eyes scanned Deku, the doctor and her taking over. "Are you hurt? You appeared on our long-range energy sensors about 10 minutes ago. The spike was massive, unlike anything we've ever seen." "I'm okay," Deku said, his body still humming with that strange vibration. "Just a little disoriented." "A little disoriented?" Cisco Ramon scoffed, walking around Deku with wide, analytical eyes. "Dude, you didn't just show up. You punched a hole in the dimensional barrier. The energy signature from your arrival looked like a supernova right on top of a Kiss concert. All lightning and rock and roll." He pointed a finger at Deku. "You. Medbay. Now, I want to know what makes you tick." "Caitlin, I'm betting on some kind of internal biological particle accelerator. I have a quirk," Deku tried to explain, feeling increasingly out of his depth. Cisco snapped his fingers. "Knew it! Cool name. What's it do? Does it have a theme song?" "Please tell me it has a theme song." "Let's get him checked out first, Cisco," Caitlin interjected gently, guiding a bewildered Deku towards an adjoining room. "Barry, debrief. What happened?" As Caitlin led Deku into the pristine white med bay and started attaching sensors to him, he could hear Barry's voice from the main room, explaining the fight in rapid-fire sentences. The words washed over him, echoes, bigger swarm than usual. "This kid shows up, unreal power output, green lightning, supercharged by the ambient speed force energy." Caitlin drew a blood sample, her movements efficient and calm. "Your cellular structure is fascinating, Mr. Midoriya," she said, her eyes glued to a monitor displaying his biological data. "There are markers of extreme physical trauma all over your body. Healed fractures that would have crippled a normal person for life. Your bone density is off the charts, and this energy your body is producing, it's clean biological, but the output is equivalent to a small power plant. That's one for all," Deku explained, wincing as a strange device scanned his arm. "It's a stockpiling quirk. It's been passed down from person to person, growing stronger with each generation." Caitlin paused, looking at him. "Passed down? Like genetically?" "No. It can be given to another person. Willingly. The DNA of the recipient rewrites to accommodate it." Caitlin and Cisco, who had poked his head into the med bay, exchanged a look of pure astonishment. "So you're telling me," Cisco said slowly, "that your superpower is, like, a biological heirloom? A hand-me-down of pure awesome?" "I guess that's one way to put it," Deku mumbled. Just then, Barry walked in, a fresh SDR Labs sweatshirt on, a look of deep gravity on his face. "We've confirmed it," he said, his voice low. "Cisco ran a satellite scan and a cross-check of global databases. There is no city in Japan called Muzutafu. No high school called UA. We checked the vibrational frequency of the energy you're passively emitting." He pointed to a complex waveform on a monitor. "It doesn't match our Earth's baseline frequency. You're from another dimension, Midoriya. A parallel Earth." The words hit Deku with the force of a physical blow. He had suspected it, of course. The different city, the strange lightning storm, the monster, it all pointed to it. But hearing it confirmed, stated as an immutable scientific fact, made it terrifyingly real. His heart plummeted. All Might. His mother. His friends. Uraraka, Ida, Todoroki, Bakugo, were they a whole universe away? A universe he might never get back to? A wave of panic, cold and sharp, seized him. His breathing hitched. Hey, easy, Barry said, noticing his distress. He put a hand on his shoulder, the same grounding touch as before. We've dealt with this before. We've crossed the dimensional barrier. It's not a one-way trip. We will get you home. I promise. Barry's words were sincere, his gaze unwavering. Deku looked into the eyes of this man, this stranger, and saw the steady confidence of a seasoned hero. It was enough to quell the rising tide of panic, at least for now. Deku took a shaky breath and nodded. Okay. Thank you. He straightened up, his resolve hardening. Panicking wouldn't help. He needed to understand. You said? Speed Force. And those creatures' echoes. You mentioned a war. Please tell me what's happening. They moved back to the cortex, the main hub of the lab. Cisco brought up a holographic display in the center of the room. Barry took a deep breath, the weight of the war settling back onto his shoulders. The Speed Force, he began, his voice taking on the tone of a weary professor, isn't just what makes me run fast. It's a fundamental force of the universe, like gravity or electromagnetism. It's an extra-dimensional energy source that governs all motion. It's the engine of momentum, the very concept of forward progress. It's what moves time itself. Deku listened, his analytical mind firing on all cylinders, trying to latch on to concepts he could understand. A fundamental force tied to motion. Not a quirk, but a law of physics personified. But every force, Barry continued, his expression darkening, has an opposite. For every positive, there's a negative. For years, my greatest enemy, the Reverse Flash, tried to create his own speed force, a negative speed force, powered by paradox and selfish emotion. He succeeded, but he created something he couldn't control. The hologram shifted, showing a swirling vortex of black and sickly red energy. From that negative speed force, an entity was born. A consciousness. We call it the paradox. Catchy, right? Cisco muttered grimly. I workshopped it. The other options were the Great Static and Mr. Stops-A-Lot. Caitlin shot him a look. Barry ignored him. The paradox isn't a person. It doesn't want to rule the world or get rich. It's a sentient philosophy. It believes that all motion is suffering, that life, change, and progress are the root of all pain. Its ultimate goal is to consume the speed force entirely, to erase the very concept of motion from all of existence, and achieve a state of perfect, absolute stasis. The heat-death of everything forever. The sheer scale of the threat was staggering. It dwarfed anything Deku had ever faced. All for One was a monster who wanted to control the world. This paradox wanted to end it, to unplug the universe itself. Its army, Barry said, gesturing to the image of the glitching shadow creature, is made of echoes. When a speedster from any timeline, any dimension dies, their consciousness is supposed to be absorbed peacefully into the speed force, becoming one with the energy. The paradox corrupts them before they can find that peace. It twists them, turning them into these things, hungry specters of what they once were, now serving its mission to hunt down other speedsters and drain the speed force. A chilling realization dawned on Deku. It brought me here. The storm in my world, that was it, wasn't it? It was trying to get to me. We think so, Caitlin said, bringing up another screen. It showed two waveforms. One was a steady, powerful crimson line labeled Speed Force. The other was Deku's energy signature, a wildly fluctuating mountain range of green and gold. The paradox is drawn to Speed Force energy. When you activated your quirk, it must have registered to it on some level. The energy you produce, it has similar properties. Kinetic potential, motion, it resonates. Cisco leaned forward, his earlier jokey demeanor gone, replaced by intense focus. That's not the whole story, though. We've been analyzing the data from your blood sample and the energy readings from your Delaware smash. Barry, Caitlin, look at this. He isolated a strand of Deku's energy signature and magnified it. The waveform wasn't smooth. It was composed of smaller, distinct layers, 8 of them, to be precise, all wrapped around a central, blazing core. It's not one energy source, Cisco said, his voice filled with discovery. It's layered. It's a legacy. Caitlin, you said it, his power is a biological heirloom. Mr. Midoriya, you said it was passed down, right? From person to person? Deku nodded slowly. Yes. 9 users, including me. That's it, Cisco exclaimed, pointing at the screen. It's not just stockpiled energy. It's stockpiled life force. The will, the experiences, the very spirits of the previous users. This speed force is tied to life and motion. Your quirk, one for all, isn't a power source. It's a massive battery, charged up over generations with concentrated hope and willpower. It doesn't generate speed, but it resonates with the speed force on a conceptual level. It's the ultimate amplifier. Barry stared at the screen, then at Deku, his eyes wide with a dawning, terrifying understanding. That's why you're so powerful here. The ambient speed force energy is pouring into you like water into a sponge. And your quirk is amplifying it 100-fold. That's why the echoes are so drawn to you. He ran a hand through his hair. You're a walking, talking speed force battery. A beacon of everything the paradox hates. The weight of their discovery settled in the room. Deku was not just a stray who had fallen into their war. He was a potential game changer. And a prime target. This changes things, Barry said, his voice firm with new resolve. A spark of hope had ignited in his weary eyes. The paradox feeds on negative energy, on despair and stagnation. Your power, Midoriya, it's the conceptual opposite. It's a legacy of self-sacrifice, of moving forward, of pure, unadulterated heroism. Deku felt a blush creep up his neck at the praise, but he also understood the terrifying implication. He was a weapon. And every weapon draws the enemy's fire. But we have a problem. Cisco cut in, ever the pragmatist. He gestured to Deku's costume. First off, that. It's mostly cotton and some kind of polymer blend, right? You were generating so much kinetic friction during that run, it's a miracle you didn't burst into flames. Your boots are solid, but the rest of you is a fire hazard. Deku looked down at his tattered suit. He hadn't even considered that. We need to get you into something that can handle the friction and the energy you're putting out, Cisco continued, a creative spark returning to his eyes. I can whip something up. Same material as Barry's suit, a reinforced metapolymer with embedded thermal plating. It'll hold up. He grinned. And we're definitely keeping the green. And the ears. The ears are non-negotiable. Deku managed a small, grateful smile. In the face of this cosmic horror, the simple, practical act of getting a new suit was a comforting anchor to reality. The bigger problem, Barry said, pacing the room, is control. You have the raw power of a battleship, kid, but the fine control of a fire hose. What you did out there was amazing, but it was messy. You could have leveled half a city block. In this war, precision is just as important as power. Deku nodded, looking at his own hands. Barry was right. He had felt the power, wild and untamed, threatening to tear him apart from the inside. He had no idea how to properly harness it, how to perform the delicate, reality-bending feats Barry had demonstrated. You're being supercharged by the speed force, Barry continued, stopping in front of him. To learn how to control it, you can't fight it. You have to understand it. You have to embrace it. He looked at Cisco and Caitlin, a decision solidifying in his eyes. They both seemed to understand what he was thinking and nodded in grim agreement. We can't teach you how to handle this power here, in a lab, Barry said, his gaze locking onto Deku's. His voice was low, intense, and filled with a strange sense of reverence. The only place to learn how to command the storm is from within the storm itself. Deku's eyes widened as he realized what Barry was suggesting. I'm taking you into the speed force. The new suit felt alien. It was smooth, almost frictionless, a single piece of dark green material that clung to his form like a second skin. Cisco had, true to his word, kept the core aesthetic. The familiar white accents, the black leggings, the metal respirator, now reinforced with a sleek, aerodynamic design, and of course, the iconic headpiece with its long, ear-like fins, but the material itself was something else entirely. It felt cool to the touch, and when he flexed, he could feel the microscopic shimmer of the metapolymer, and the faint, embedded hum of the thermal plating. It was a suit designed not just for a brawler, but for a ballistic missile. He stood on a circular platform in the center of SDR Labs, a device Cisco called the cosmic treadmill humming to life in front of him. It looked less like exercise equipment, and more like an altar to some futuristic god of motion. Barry stood beside him, already in his flash suit, the crimson a stark contrast to Deku's emerald. "You ready for this?" Barry asked, his voice calm, but his eyes held a deep-seated respect for the place they were about to go. "It's going to be a lot. Don't try to make sense of it. Just feel it." Deku's heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the steady hum of the treadmill. "What should I expect?" "Everything," Barry answered, and it was not a comforting reply. "And nothing. The speed force is a paradox. It's the source of all motion, but it's also a place of stillness. It's a physical dimension, but it's also a state of consciousness." He placed a hand on Deku's shoulder. "The most important thing to remember is your anchor. For me, it's Iris. My wife. She's my lightning rod, the one constant that brings me home. When you're inside, the speed force will try to absorb you, to make you a part of its energy. You have to hold on to something. Someone. An emotion. A memory that defines who you are." "What's yours?" Deku's mind, a frantic library of heroic theory and emotional turmoil, sorted through countless images. He saw his mother's tear-streaked, worried face. He saw Uraraka's bright, determined smile. He saw Ida's earnest chopping motions. But one image burned brighter than all the rest. It was All Might, in his skeletal form, pointing a finger at a crying, quirkless boy on a rooftop and saying, "You can become a hero." That single moment. The instant his life, his entire world, had changed. The birth of his hope. "All Might," Deku said, his voice firm with certainty. "The moment he told me I could be a hero." Barry nodded, a knowing smile on his face. "Good. Hold on to that. Let it be the lighthouse in the storm. Don't let go of it, no matter what you see." With that, they stepped onto the treadmill. "Cisco, now!" Barry yelled. The hum of the machine escalated into a roar. The world outside the platform began to blur. Deku started to run, his new boots pounding against the moving track. He activated full cowling, and the green-gold lightning erupted around him, more brilliant than ever. The suit handled it perfectly, dissipating the immense heat and friction. Beside him, Barry was a blur of pure crimson. "Match my speed," he commanded. "Focus on my emblem. Follow me." Deku pushed himself, channeling more and more of One for All. The speed was intoxicating. The air grew thick, charged with ozone and the scent of an impending storm. The lab around them dissolved, not into a blur, but into streaks of pure light, as if they were running through a tunnel of fractured rainbows. Then, the tunnel opened up, and they broke through. The sensation was like diving into an ocean of pure electricity. Izuku Midoriya gasped, but there was no air to breathe. He was floating, weightless, in an endless, infinite expanse. It was a cosmos not of stars and darkness, but of pure, unadulterated energy. Rivers of golden, white, and crimson lightning flowed around him like celestial currents. In the distance, nebulae of crackling blue and purple energy pulsed with gentle life. The entire dimension hummed with a power so vast, so ancient, it made One for All feel like a flickering candle in the face of a sun. This was the speed force. The engine room of reality. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Barry's voice was right beside him, though his form was now semi-translucent, composed of the same golden lightning that surrounded them. Deku couldn't form words. He could only stare in mute, overwhelming awe. The sheer scale of it was beyond comprehension. He felt impossibly small, an insignificant speck in the face of infinity, and he felt the pull Barry had warned him about. A gentle, seductive whisper, promising an end to struggle, a dissolution into pure energy, a blissful oneness with the universe. It was tempting. So tempting. "You can become a hero." All Might's voice, his memory, echoed in his mind. The image of that rooftop, of that single tear rolling down his mentor's face, became a shield. The seductive pull receded, kept at bay by the raw, stubborn power of his dream. Good, Barry said, sensing his success. You're holding on. Now for the first lesson, this place responds to your will. The energy is yours to command. Don't think about the physics of it. Just do it. Barry pointed to a small, floating island of solidified energy a few hundred feet away. It looked like a chunk of crystallized lightning. Try to move towards it. Don't swim, don't fly. Just go. Deku frowned. Just go. He focused on the island, willing himself to move. Nothing happened. He tried to activate float, but the quirk felt redundant here. He was already floating. He tried to use Black Whip, but the tendrils that emerged from his hand were formless, dissipating into the ambient energy like smoke. You're overthinking it, Barry coached. You're trying to use your quirks as tools. Here, they're a part of you. Your will is the tool. You want to move, so you move. It's the most basic principle of the Speed Force. Deku closed his eyes, took a deep, non-existent breath, and cleared his mind of physics, of quirk theory, of everything he thought he knew about how the world worked. He thought only of the island. He pictured himself standing on it. He didn't think about the journey, only the destination. He opened his eyes. He was standing on the island. He stumbled, looking back at the spot where he'd been. There was no sense of transition, no feeling of movement. He had simply been there, and now he was here. It was like his brain had skipped a frame. See? Barry said, appearing next to him in a flicker of gold. Here, intent is reality. Now let's try something harder. Phasing. He pointed to a large, crystalline structure drifting nearby. That's a memory fragment. A piece of a timeline from some other Earth. It's solid. But solid is just a matter of perception. It's just molecules vibrating at a certain frequency. All you have to do is match that frequency, and then shift yours just enough to pass through. Deku stared at the crystal. Match the frequency? How do I do that? You listen, Barry said simply. Everything in here has a hum, a song. Listen to the crystal. Listen to your own body. Make them sing the same tune. Deku focused, trying to filter out the overwhelming roar of the Speed Force. He listened, and slowly, he began to perceive it. The crystal had a low, resonant thrum, like a cello. He then turned his focus inward, to the core of his being. The vibration he'd been feeling ever since he arrived in this universe was his own frequency. It was a chaotic, high-pitched buzz, like 1,000 angry wasps. It was the sound of one for all, supercharged and unstable. Your energy is wild, Barry observed. It's fighting itself. You need to calm it down. Your anchor. Focus on all might. Let that memory smooth out the frequency. Deku closed his eyes again, picturing the rooftop. He felt the overwhelming gratitude, the impossible hope. The chaotic buzzing in his soul began to subside, coalescing into a single, powerful, but steady tone. A clear, strong note, like a struck bell. It was the sound of his own will. Now, he listened to the crystal again. He focused on its cello-like hum, and tried to adjust his own bell-like tone to match it. It was like tuning a guitar string by ear, a delicate process of minute adjustments. He let his own energy vibrate, pushing it lower, smoothing its edges, until the two sounds harmonized. For a single, breathtaking moment, his body and the crystal sang the same note. Now, Barry urged. Shift it. Just a little. Deku altered his frequency by the tiniest fraction, and walked forward. The sensation was indescribable. A cold, tingling feeling, like plunging his hand into static electricity, washed over him as he stepped into the crystal. For a moment, he was inside it, surrounded by translucent, crystalline walls, seeing the Speed Force outside through a warped, prismatic lens. Then, he was out the other side, standing on the empty space beyond. He had done it. He had walked through a solid object. A laugh, pure and unadulterated with joy, bubbled out of him. The sheer impossibility of it was exhilarating. You're a natural, Barry said, a genuine smile on his face. It took me months to get that right. Your power, it may be wild, but it's incredibly responsive. It was then that Deku noticed something else. As he'd focused his will, as he'd calmed the storm of One for All, another sound had emerged from within him. It wasn't one note, but a harmony, a quiet chorus of whispers, clearer and more distinct than ever before. The vestiges. They weren't just a passive presence anymore. Here, in this dimension of pure energy and consciousness, they were awake. Truly awake. The boy learns quickly, a gruff, deep voice rumbled in his mind. He recognized it as Daigoro Banjo, the fifth user. His heart is his compass, a gentle, feminine voice added. Nana Shimura, the seventh. It keeps his power from consuming him. This place, it is the substrate of our existence, a third voice mused, ancient and calm. He knew this one too. Yoichi Shigaraki, the first. The energy of One for All was always connected to this. We just never had the key to open the door. Deku's eyes went wide. He wasn't just hearing impressions or feeling emotions. He was hearing their thoughts, their voices, as clearly as he was hearing Barry's. He could feel their distinct presences within him, like 8 other souls sharing his body. What is it? Barry asked, noticing his sudden change in expression. The previous users of my quirk, Deku said, his voice trembling slightly. I can hear them. All of them. They're here. With me. Barry's eyebrows shot up. The ones you said passed the power down? Their consciousnesses are inside you? Yes. And they can sense the speed force. They're helping me. They were the ones who helped me find my anchor. They are my anchor. All of them. This was the revelation. Barry's lightning rod was one person. Deku's was a legacy. A choir of heroic souls, all bound together by a single sacred cause. It gave him a stability, a foundation, that no other speedster could possibly possess. Their training was interrupted by a violent shift in the dimension's energy. The beautiful, golden rivers of lightning began to curdle, turning a dark, blood red. The gentle hum of the speed force was replaced by a discordant shriek. The very fabric of this place began to glitch and tear, just like the alley in Central City. Paradox Echo, Barry snarled, his body tensing. He pushed Deku behind him, shielding him. A strong one. Stay back. You're not ready for this. From a newly formed tear in the energy field, a figure emerged. It was not like the shadowy, indistinct echoes from the street. This one was horrifyingly solid. It was a hulking brute, clad in a suit of gunmetal gray armor that seemed forged from solidified rage and future technology. The armor was covered in wicked, razor-sharp edges, and a blade extended from its right arm. Blue-white lightning, a purer and more potent form of the speed force's energy, crackled around it, but it was tainted, corrupted by an undercurrent of that sick, negative red. Its face was hidden by a helmet, but its voice, when it spoke, was a metallic rasp that sent a chill down Deku's spine. A voice he'd heard in the chaotic tumble through dimensions. The Flash, it hissed, its head tilting as it took in the scene. Still playing teacher to lost children? You never learn. Barry's entire posture changed. All warmth and patience vanished, replaced by a cold, hard fury. Savitar, he breathed, the name like a curse on his lips. You should be gone. I scattered you through time. You're just an echo. An echo of a god is still a god to insects, the armored figure, Savitar, sneered. It took a step, and the very ground of the speed force buckled under its weight. The paradox found the pieces of me you left scattered across eternity. It gave me form again. Purpose. It showed me the truth you always run from, Flash, that time is a prison, and I am the key. Deku felt a wave of pure, unadulterated malevolence wash off the creature. It was far more powerful, far more intelligent than the mindless echoes. This was a lieutenant. A general in the army of the paradox. Savitar's gaze shifted, its helmeted head turning to fixate on Deku. A low, appreciative hum emanated from its armor. And what is this? A new color in the spectrum. Green. So much raw power. So naive. So delicious. You will not touch him, Barry growled, dropping into a runner's stance. You cannot stop me, Savitar retorted. You are a memory of your former self, running on fumes, while I am reborn in the font of entropy itself. Savitar moved. It wasn't the graceful speed of Barry Allen. It was brutal, concussive speed. He didn't run, he exploded from one point to another, leaving miniature sonic booms and craters of fractured energy in his wake. He was on Barry in an instant, the blade on his arm flashing. Barry was just as fast, parrying the strike with his own forearm, the impact sending a shockwave of red and blue lightning across the landscape. They became a whirlwind of color and violence, a chaotic dance of gods in the heart of creation. Deku watched, horrified and helpless. The speed of their battle was beyond anything he could comprehend. It was a fight happening in nanoseconds, each blow capable of leveling a city. He was a child watching titans clash. He tried to help, to move, but his body felt sluggish, mired in molasses. His mind, supercharged as it was, couldn't keep up with the sheer velocity of the combatants. Suddenly, a streak of yellow and red shot past him. "Need a hand, Uncle Barry?" A new voice chimed, young and full of cocksure energy. A third speedster, younger than Barry, with messy auburn hair and a bright yellow and red suit, joined the fray. He moved with an energetic, almost frantic speed, leaving a trail of yellow lightning. This was Wally West's Kid Flash. "Wally, no! Get out of here!" Barry shouted, but it was too late. Wally was already engaging Savitar, his movements fast but lacking the brutal power of the armored foe. "Two flashes?" Savitar chuckled, its voice dripping with contempt. More kindling for the fire. With the two flashes occupied, a dark plan formed in Savitar's corrupted mind. It saw Deku, the beacon, the wellspring of untapped power. This was its true target. In a brilliant feint, Savitar allowed Barry to land a solid punch that sent it stumbling back. As Wally moved in to press the advantage, Savitar didn't counter. Instead, it used the momentum to pivot, its arm blade retracting as its hand began to vibrate with an intensity that warped the very air around it. It wasn't aiming for Wally. It lunged past him, straight towards Deku. Deku saw it coming. The world slowed to a crawl. He saw the vibrating hand, crackling with negative energy. He tried to move, to activate full cowling to its absolute limit, but he was too slow. A glacier in the face of an avalanche. No, he wasn't going to be a liability. He wasn't going to be a victim. Float. Black Whip. F.A. Gene. Danger Sense. Smokescreen. Gearshift. The quirks of the vestiges flared within him, a desperate, unified chorus. He felt a strange lurch inside him, a click, as if a new gear had just engaged. It was the fourth user's quirk, Gearshift, activating on a subconscious, instinctual level. For a single, infinitesimal moment, he altered the very concept of his own velocity, ignoring inertia. He moved. He didn't dodge to the side. He shot backwards, 100 feet in a blink of an eye, the movement so sudden and violent it felt like he'd been punched by reality itself. Savitar's attack missed, its hand passing through the space where Deku's chest had been a microsecond before. The armored monstrosity skidded to a halt, its helmeted head turning slowly, a flicker of genuine surprise in its posture. But the danger wasn't over. Savitar's lunge had been a diversion. As it missed Deku, it was already spinning, its true attack vector aimed at the now exposed Kid Flash. Wally, caught off guard by Savitar's sudden change in target, and Deku's impossible dodge, had no time to react. Barry saw it. "Wally!" Savitar's vibrating hand, still crackling with the paradox's energy, plunged into Wally West's chest. Wally screamed. It was a sound of pure agony, not just of the flesh, but of the soul. The brilliant yellow lightning that wreathed his body flickered violently. The negative red energy from Savitar's hand poured into him, a virulent poison. The yellow light sputtered, dimmed, and then, with a final, heart-wrenching fizzle, it went out. Wally's body went limp, his connection to the speed force severed. He fell from the air, no longer a speedster, just a boy in a costume, tumbling into the endless expanse below. Barry let out a roar of pure, unadulterated rage. He became a blur of solid crimson, moving with a speed born of desperation and fury. He slammed into Savitar with the force of a meteor, a blow that finally staggered the armored giant. But Savitar merely chuckled, a low, cruel sound. "The future is broken, Flash. The boy is lost to the current." And the little green spark. It turned its helmeted gaze back to Deku, who was frozen in horror. "We will meet again. The paradox has plans for you." With that, Savitar's form dissolved into a swirl of corrupted red and blue lightning, vanishing back into the tear from which it came. The tear sealed itself, and the speed force began to slowly, painfully, return to its golden equilibrium. The battle was over. The silence that followed was more deafening than the fight itself. Barry didn't pursue. He dove, a streak of red lightning, catching Wally's falling form before he could be lost to the infinite abyss. He returned to the crystalline island where Deku stood, cradling the unconscious form of his nephew. Deku stared at Wally. The vibrant energy that had surrounded him was gone. He looked pale, diminished. Just a boy. He was breathing, but the light in him had been extinguished. Is he? Deku couldn't finish the sentence. Barry gently laid Wally down on the crystalline surface. He reached out, placing a hand on Wally's chest, trying to feel for the familiar thrum of the speed force. There was nothing, just a faint, mortal heartbeat. His connection, it's gone, Barry said, his voice hollow, deadened by failure. He slumped to his knees beside his fallen sidekick, his shoulders shaking. All the energy, the confidence, the power of the Flash seemed to have drained away, leaving only a man drowning in guilt. He severed it. Wally, he's powerless. Deku stood there, his own body trembling, the aftershock of his instinctual gearshift use making his muscles ache. He looked at Barry's despair, at Wally's still form, at the serene, beautiful, and terrifying expanse of the speed force. He had power. More power than he had ever dreamed of. But in the face of a true monster, in a war for the soul of reality, he had been too slow, too weak, too inexperienced. His very presence had created the opening for this tragedy. The weight of that responsibility settled on him, cold and heavy as a shroud. He had survived, but at what cost? He had come here to learn, and his first lesson was the bitter taste of defeat. The return to SDR Labs was a silent, somber affair. Barry, carrying Wally's limp form, ran with a grim purpose that lacked his usual vibrant energy. The crimson lightning that trailed him seemed dimmer, tinged with the gray of grief. Deku followed, the unfamiliar suit feeling heavy, the exhilaration of the speed force replaced by a cold, gnawing hollowness in his gut. He had been a part of something extraordinary, and it had curdled into tragedy before his eyes. They materialized in the cortex to the sight of Cisco and Caitlin rushing forward, their faces etched with concern. Their relief at seeing Barry and Deku safe was immediately eclipsed by the sight of the still, pale figure in Barry's arms. "Oh my God, Wally!" Caitlin gasped, her medical instincts kicking in instantly. "What happened? Get him to the medbay, now!" As Barry rushed past, Caitlin and Cisco fell in step, firing a volley of frantic questions that Barry answered in clipped, deadened tones. Savitar and Echo, but stronger, intelligent. He went for Midoriya. Wally pushed him, I moved to cover. Savitar's hand, it was a feint, he severed his connection. Deku stood alone in the center of the cortex, the star-shaped emblem on the floor feeling like a spotlight in an interrogation. The voices from the medbay were a muffled, panicked symphony of medical jargon and despair. He felt like an intruder, a foreign element that had contaminated this family and brought disaster to their doorstep. The heroic drive that was usually his compass, his North Star, was spinning wildly. He had faced down villains, monsters, and his own limitations, but he had never felt this profoundly, uselessly helpless. It was a cold, alien feeling, and he hated it. He could still see it replaying in his mind's eye. Savitar's vibrating hand, the flash of negative energy, the light in Wally's eyes extinguishing like a snuffed candle. He had been the target. His presence, his unique energy, had been the catalyst. If he had never been pulled into this dimension, Wally would still be Kid Flash. He would still be safe. The logic was simple, brutal, and inescapable. He sank onto one of the chairs at the console, burying his face in his hands. The sleek, frictionless material of his new gloves felt cold against his skin. He was a hero in training. His entire life was dedicated to the principle of saving people. And in his first real test in this new world, someone had been grievously wounded on his watch, because of him. The weight of that failure was crushing. After what felt like an eternity, the doors to the medbay swished open. Caitlin emerged, her face pale, her professional mask barely concealing a deep well of sadness. Cisco followed, his usual vibrant energy completely absent, leaving him looking deflated and older than his years. "He's stable," Caitlin said, her voice quiet but carrying across the silent cortex. "Physically, he's fine. But his connection to the speed force, it's gone. It's not just blocked or suppressed, it's been excised. Like a surgeon removing a nerve. There's nothing there for us to even try and jumpstart. The paradox energy, it didn't just hurt him," Cisco added, his voice raspy. He swiped a hand across a tablet, bringing up a complex energy scan on the main monitor. It showed Wally's biological readings. Where there should have been a faint, golden thrum of speed force energy, there was only a void. It ate his connection. Consumed it. "There's nothing left." Deku looked up, his heart sinking with every word. He met Caitlin's gaze, his own eyes pleading. "Can you fix it? Is there anything?" Caitlin gave a slow, sad shake of her head. "We don't know. This is unprecedented. We've seen speedsters lose their powers before, but this is different. This is a fundamental violation of what he is. We can't fix what isn't there." The finality in her voice was like a physical blow. Barry walked out of the medbay last. He looked broken. The hope that had ignited in his eyes when he discovered the nature of Deku's power was gone, replaced by the hollowed-out look of a man who had seen his worst fears realized. He walked past them without a word, heading towards a small, private workshop at the back of the labs, the door sliding shut behind him with a soft hiss of finality. The silence he left in his wake was heavy and suffocating. "He blames himself," Cisco said, slumping into a chair. "Every time one of us gets hurt, he puts it all on his shoulders. Savitar, that name brings back his worst memories. A fight he barely won, at a terrible cost. Seeing that thing again, seeing it take Wally's speed, it's tearing him apart." Deku felt a fresh wave of guilt. He had not only failed to protect Wally, but he had inadvertently become a catalyst for Barry's personal hell. He was a walking, talking reminder of this disaster. He needed to do something. He couldn't just sit here, drowning in his own misery while this team, this family, fell apart. But what could he do? He couldn't fight Savitar alone. He couldn't magically restore Wally's powers. He was a powerhouse with no idea how to wield his own strength, a strategist with no understanding of the battlefield. Then, he felt it. A gentle, persistent hum from deep within his soul. It wasn't the chaotic buzz of the speed force. It was the calm, steady harmony of the vestiges. They had been quiet since the return, a silent chorus observing the tragedy. Now they were stirring. "This is not your failure, Ninth." The voice of Daigoro Banjo, the fifth user, was a gruff but steadying presence in his mind. "Self-pity is a luxury a hero cannot afford," another voice, sharp and disciplined, added. The second user, whose name he still did not know. "They are right," Nana Shimura's voice, warm and maternal, flowed through him. "Wallowing in guilt will save no one. It will not help the boy in that room, nor will it help the hero hiding from his own heart." Her words cut through his despair like a scalpel. She was right. This wasn't about him. It was about them. About Wally. About Barry. He had a role to play, and it wasn't as a tragic figure. He stood up, his posture straightening with newfound resolve. "I need to think," he announced to the room. Cisco and Caitlin looked up at him, their expressions weary but curious. "I need a quiet place to meditate." Cisco gestured vaguely towards a corridor. "Training room B is empty. It's soundproofed. Knock yourself out, man." Deku nodded his thanks and walked away, his steps now filled with purpose. He wasn't just going to think. He was going to hold a council of war. Training room B was a simple, padded gray space, designed for hand-to-hand combat practice. It was quiet, sterile, and perfect. Deku walked to the center of the room, sat down, and crossed his legs, mimicking a meditative pose he had once seen in a movie. He closed his eyes. "Okay," he whispered into the silence. "I'm listening." He didn't try to enter the speed force. He didn't try to activate full cowling. He simply reached inward, focusing on that inner harmony, that shared soul space where the vestiges resided. The world outside faded away. The gray, padded room dissolved. He found himself standing on a familiar, yet fundamentally altered plane. It was his mental world, the vast, empty space where he communed with the previous users of One for All. But it was no longer just a dark, starless void. The entire dimension was now threaded with faint, shimmering golden lines, the residual energy of the speed force. The ground beneath his feet crackled with it, and the air itself hummed with a low, kinetic potential. The speed force had left an indelible mark on his very soul, and they were all there. Not as faint, seated specters, but as solid, standing figures, their forms clearer and more defined than ever before. 8 heroes, arrayed in a semicircle before him. Their own spectral bodies were faintly alight with the same golden energy, as if his journey had awakened something in them as well. At the forefront stood Nana Shimura, her capelet fluttering in a non-existent breeze, her face a mixture of compassion and fierce determination. Beside her was the hulking form of Daigoro Banjo, his arms crossed over his broad chest, and standing slightly apart, yet radiating an undeniable presence, was Yoichi Shigaraki, the first, his wispy white hair seeming to drift in the golden currents, his eyes ancient and impossibly wise. The others, the second and third, the fourth, Haikid Shinomori, and the sixth, N, stood with them, a silent, powerful council. "You have questions, ninth," Yoichi said, his voice soft but resonant, echoing in the space. "Ask them." Deku took a deep breath, the sheer presence of them all so tangible it was almost overwhelming. "Savitar. The paradox, what are they? Not just their history, but what are they fundamentally? How can we fight something that seems to be an idea more than a person?" Nana Shimura stepped forward. The golden light seemed to cling to her, illuminating the gentle but unbreakable strength in her features. "You felt it, didn't you, Izuku? When that creature, Savitar, was near? The feeling it gave off?" Deku nodded. "It was cold. Empty. It felt like giving up." "Precisely," Nana said, her eyes alight with understanding. "That is their weapon. Not the speed, not the armor. Their true power is despair. It is a conceptual weapon. The paradox, this entity Barry spoke of, it doesn't just feed on negative emotions like a vampire feeds on blood. It is negative emotion. It is the embodiment of regret, fear, loss, and the desire for it all to just stop." She gestured to the space around them. "Think of Barry Allen. He is a man haunted by his past. His mother's death, the mistakes he's made, the people he couldn't save. These are not just memories for him, they are open wounds. The paradox and its echoes use these wounds. They whisper into them, they pour salt in them, they amplify that pain until it becomes a hero's entire world. They don't defeat the body, they erode the soul." Daigoro Banjo grunted in agreement. "It's a coward's tactic. They can't win a straight fight against a hero with a full heart, so they break the heart first. We've seen it before, ninth. My era, the era of chaos. All for One ruled not just with power, but with fear. He broke spirits, turned hope into a liability. It's the same principle, just on a cosmic, reality-bending scale." Deku's mind raced, connecting the dots. Barry's reaction. His immediate shutdown after Wally was hurt. It wasn't just grief. It was a crippling, familiar despair, weaponized against him by an old foe wearing a new face. "So, how do we fight it?" Deku asked, his voice gaining strength. "If its weapon is despair, what's ours?" It was Yoichi Shigaraki who answered, his calm voice cutting through the hum of the space. He took a step forward, his gaze piercing yet kind. He looked not at Deku, but through him, at the blazing core of One for All that bound them all together. "You are asking a question to which you are the living answer, Izuku Midoriya," the first user said. He raised a hand, and from his palm, a gentle, pure white light emanated, untainted by the speed force gold. "One for All was not born from a desire for power. It was born from a desire to save. My brother had the power to take, to hoard, to control. I had only the power to give. To pass on. This quirk, at its very inception, was an act of selfless hope in the face of overwhelming despair. The other vestiges began to glow with their own inner light, their spectral forms becoming brilliant beacons. Every single one of us," Nana continued, her voice ringing with passion, "took on this power not for glory, not for vengeance, but to protect the innocent. to preserve the smiles of the next generation. We fought, we bled, and in the end, we died, passing this torch of hope into the future. We are not just a collection of quirks, kid, Daigoro boomed. We are a legacy of defiance. Every user, every battle, every person saved, it all added to the core of this power. It's not just stockpiled energy, it's stockpiled will. Stockpiled hope. Yoichi's eyes met Deku's. The paradox is the philosophy of stasis and endings, one for all, passed from one to another, a chain of sacrifice that stretches across generations, is the philosophy of continuation. Of moving forward. It is the conceptual opposite of everything the paradox stands for. It is not just an amplifier for the speed force, ninth. It is an antidote to the poison of the negative speed force. The truth of it slammed into Deku with the force of a Detroit smash. His eyes widened in breathtaking realization. He had been thinking of his quirk as a power source, a tool for punching things harder or moving faster. He was wrong. It was so much more. One for all wasn't the gun. It was the bullet. A bullet made of pure, concentrated, weaponized hope. So the plan. Deku breathed, the pieces clicking into place with blinding speed. We can't just outrun the paradox. We can't just punch it until it stops. That's playing its game. It wants a war of attrition, a battle that wears down the spirit. We have to infect it. Precisely. Heikid Shinomori, the fourth, spoke for the first time, his voice raspy and scarred, but filled with a sharp, tactical intelligence. You cannot destroy a shadow with a fist. You must illuminate it. You, ninth, are the lamp. You are the culmination of all of us. And the sixth added, his voice layered with a quiet determination. You have access to all our quirks, all our wills. You must learn to channel not just the raw power of one for all, but its very essence. Its soul. You must become a conduit for our collective hope. The plan was audacious. It was terrifying. It was also the only thing that made sense. It wasn't about being stronger or faster than the enemy. It was about being conceptually, philosophically, and spiritually their polar opposite. But how? Deku asked, the practical side of his brain kicking in. How do I channel an emotion? A concept? You've already begun, Nana said gently. In the Speed Force, when you faced Savitar, you didn't just use a quirk to dodge him. For a moment you let us guide you. You let the Force will to survive, his desperate need to adapt, flow through you. That instinctual use of gearshift, that was the beginning. You must learn to do that consciously. To call upon not just our abilities, but our spirits. She smiled, a brilliant, hopeful expression. Call upon Daigoro's boisterous courage when you need to stand firm. Call upon the second's discipline when you need focus. Call upon my desire to protect the smiles of others. And call upon Yoichi's original, foundational hope when you face the heart of the void. We are your arsenal, Izuku. An arsenal of hearts. Deku looked at the 8 heroes standing before him. He saw the fire in Daigoro's eyes, the quiet strength in Nana's smile, the ancient wisdom in Yoichi's gaze. He was not alone. He had never been alone. He was the 9th wielder of a sacred trust, the focal point of a heroic legacy that spanned more than a century. A new sense of purpose, clean and sharp and powerful, washed away the last dregs of his guilt. He had a path forward. A way to fight back. A way to not just help Barry, but to offer a genuine solution. There is one more thing, Yoichi said, his expression turning serious. This path requires you to be a symbol. But to be a symbol for others, you must first be a hero to yourself. The man, Barry Allen, is lost in his own past. He is trapped in a prison of his own making, a prison the paradox will gladly use as its own fortress. You cannot lead him into battle if he will not follow. Before you can face the paradox, you must first help him face himself. Deku understood. This wasn't just a physical or cosmic war. It was an emotional one, and the first battle had to be fought right here, in SDR Labs. He had to save the Flash before they could save the world. He nodded to the Council of Ghosts, his heart full. Thank you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. All of you, Nana smiled. We are one for all, Izuku. And you are all for one of us. Now go. Be the hero you were born to be. The world of the vestiges faded, the golden light receding, the voices softening to a comforting hum. The gray, padded walls of the training room resolved around him. He opened his eyes, the sterile silence of the room feeling different now. It wasn't empty. It was filled with potential. He stood up, his body feeling light, his mind sharp and clear. He knew what he had to do. He walked out of the training room, his new suit feeling less like armor and more like a hero's uniform. He strode through the cortex, his expression no longer one of a lost, guilt-ridden boy, but of a hero with a mission. Cisco and Caitlin, who were huddled over a console, looked up at his approach, surprised by the sudden, dramatic shift in his demeanor. "Where's Barry?" Deku asked, his voice calm and steady. Cisco pointed a thumb towards the workshop. "Still in there. Hasn't come out. Hasn't said a word." Deku nodded and walked towards the workshop door without hesitation. "Whoa, hey man, I don't know if that's a good idea," Cisco warned, standing up. "When he gets like this, he needs space. He just wants to be left alone." Deku paused at the door, turning his head to look back at them. He gave them a small, confident smile that seemed to momentarily stun them with its sincerity. "I know," he said. "But right now, what a hero wants and what a hero needs are two different things." And with the quiet counsel of 8 ghosts echoing in his soul, he stepped forward, not as a sidekick or a stray, but as an equal, ready to help his friend fight the demons within, so they could face the monsters without. The door slid open, and he walked into the darkness to find the light. The workshop was dark, not just dim, but deliberately, oppressively dark. The only illumination came from the faint blue glow of a single, inactive monitor and the thin line of light from the cortex as the door slid shut behind Deku, sealing him in. The air was cold and still, heavy with the scent of ozone, machine oil, and a silence that felt heavier than any sound. It was a tomb of a hero's own making, a place to entomb his guilt. Barry Allen sat on a stool in the center of the room, his back to the door. He wasn't wearing his flash suit anymore, just the SDR Labs sweatshirt and jeans. His posture was a study in defeat, his shoulders slumped, his head bowed. He was staring at something on the workbench before him, the crumpled, empty cowl of Kid Flash's suit. The vibrant yellow fabric looked dull and lifeless in the gloom. He didn't turn or acknowledge Deku's presence. "You shouldn't be in here," he said, his voice a low, gravelly monotone, devoid of its usual warmth. "Cisco said the same thing," Deku replied, his own voice quiet but steady. He took a hesitant step into the room, his eyes adjusting to the darkness. He could see shelves lined with half-finished gadgets, blueprints tacked to the walls, and pieces of various flash suits in different states of repair. It was a tinkerer's sanctuary, now converted into a prison cell. "Then you should have listened," Barry said. "I'm not good company right now." "I'm not here for company," Deku said, taking another step. "I'm here because we have a war to fight, and one of our best soldiers is AWOL." A humorless, bitter chuckle escaped Barry's lips. "Best soldier? Look around, kid." The best soldier just led his nephew into a trap. He just stood there while a ghost from his past ripped away the best part of Wally's life. Some soldier. He finally turned his head, and in the faint light, Deku could see the raw, red-rimmed exhaustion in his eyes. This wasn't just fatigue. This was a soul-deep weariness. "This is my fault, Midoriya. All of it. Savitar, the paradox. They exist because of me. Because of my mistakes." "What mistakes?" Deku asked gently, not as an accusation, but as a genuine question. Barry looked away, back at the cowl. "You wouldn't understand. Try me," Deku insisted, his voice unwavering. He wasn't going to be pushed away. He had the Council of 8 heroes at his back, and their collective will was a fortress. Suddenly, the air in the room grew colder. The faint blue glow from the monitor began to flicker, not with an electrical fault, but with a malevolent, corrupted energy. Jagged lines of scarlet lightning, the signature of the negative speed force, began to crawl across the screen like digital veins. Deku's danger sense screamed. It wasn't a prickle at the back of his neck, it was a blaring, full-body alarm. "Barry, look out!" But it was too late. The red lightning leaped from the screen, not as a projectile, but as a wave of pure, negative energy. It wasn't aimed at Deku. It washed over Barry, who didn't even try to move. He just sat there as the energy enveloped him, his body going rigid, his eyes widening in a silent scream. "Barry!" Deku shouted, lunging forward. He reached for Barry's shoulder, but as his fingers made contact, the world dissolved. The workshop, the darkness, the faint blue light, it all vanished. Deku was thrown into a disorienting, nauseating vortex of chaotic color and sound. It was like his forced transit to this dimension, but more intimate, more personal, and infinitely more malicious. When reality resolved itself, he was no longer in SDR labs. He was standing in what looked like a normal, suburban living room. Afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows. The decor was warm, a little dated. A half-eaten bowl of cereal sat on the coffee table. It felt peaceful, serene. But the peace was a lie. Deku could feel it. The air was thick with an impending, cyclical dread. A few feet away, Barry stood frozen, his eyes wide with a horror that was bone-deep. He was staring at a woman with kind eyes and auburn hair, humming a gentle tune as she arranged flowers in a vase. "Nora Allen? Barry's mother. Where are we?" Deku whispered, his voice trembling. "My memory," Barry choked out, his voice barely audible. "The worst day of my life." As if on cue, the atmosphere shattered. Two blurs of lightning, one red, one yellow, erupted into the living room, tearing it apart. The furniture splintered, the walls cracked. It was a whirlwind of violence. Deku watched, horrified, as the yellow blur, a figure of pure malice that he instinctively knew was the Reverse Flash, turned its attention to Nora. The memory fast-forwarded with sickening speed. The murder. The young Barry watching, helpless. His father being framed. The entire sequence played out in a hyper-realistic, torturous loop. And Barry was forced to watch, unable to move, unable to scream, unable to look away. "This is its power," Barry rasped, tears streaming down his face. "The paradox, it traps you. It makes you relive your failures. Again. And again. Forever." The scene dissolved, the comforting living room melting away into a new horror. Now they stood on a rain-slicked street at night. In front of them was another Barry, this one in his flash suit, vibrating with indecision. He was watching his past self, watching his mother's murder again, this time with the power to stop it. "Flashpoint, the present-day," Barry whispered in agony. "The moment I broke time. I was so selfish. I just wanted my mom back. I didn't think about the consequences." The memory Barry ran, a streak of red lightning, and saved his mother. And reality fractured. The world around them warped and twisted. Deku caught glimpses of a hellish alternate timeline, a war-torn world, heroes turned into killers, a reality steeped in death and despair, all because of one selfish act. The scene shifted again. A desolate wasteland. Barry was on his knees before the armored form of Savitar. But this wasn't the echo from the Speed Force. This was the original. "You see, Flash?" The memory Savitar gloated, its voice a triumphant sneer. "You create your own monsters. I am a consequence. A time remnant you cast aside, driven mad by an eternity of rejection. You made me. Your selfish sentimentality is your greatest weakness." The memory Savitar drove its blade through the chest of Iris West, Barry's wife. "No!" Barry finally screamed, the sound raw and broken. He lunged forward, but he passed through the figures like they were smoke. They were ghosts. He was the one who was trapped. The scene dissolved, and they were in a void. A black, empty space, featureless and infinite. Barry collapsed to his knees, sobbing, his body racked with tremors. He was completely broken. "It's true," he wept, his voice cracking. "Everything," he said. "Everything I do, it just creates more pain. I saved my mom and created a war. I tried to fix it and created Savitar. I brought you here, and now Wally. Wally is paying the price for my hubris." He looked up at Deku, his eyes hollowed out by despair. "I'm not a hero. I'm a catalyst for tragedy. A walking, talking paradox. The paradox, it's right. All this motion, all this running, it just leads to more suffering. Maybe stillness is peace." Deku felt the crushing weight of Barry's despair. It was a tangible thing in this psychic prison, a force that sought to smother his own hope. He felt the logic of it, the seductive pull of giving up. It would be so easy to just agree, to let the stillness take them both. No. Nana Shimura's voice echoed in his soul, a warm, defiant light against the encroaching darkness. A hero's heart is not measured by the absence of failure, but by the strength of their will to stand up after falling. He has forgotten, ninth, Yoichi's calm voice added. He has forgotten why he started running in the first place. The vestiges were right. Barry was lost, drowning in the sea of his own regrets. And Deku wasn't just a spectator here. He was an anchor. He had been pulled into this psychic prison for a reason. He walked over to the broken hero and knelt in front of him, meeting his desolate gaze. Deku's own heart ached with empathy. He knew this feeling. He knew this darkness. He had lived in it. You think I don't understand? Deku said, his voice soft but firm, cutting through Barry's litany of failure. Barry looked at him, confused. What are you talking about? You're a kid with a god-tier power. What do you know about failure? A sad, knowing smile touched Deku's lips. He didn't puff out his chest or make a grand declaration. He did what he did best. He shared his own pain, offering his own vulnerability as a bridge. Before I got this power, Deku began, his gaze turning inward, to a memory just as painful as any of Barry's. I was nothing. I was born quirkless in a world where 80% of the population has a superpower. I was less than zero. I was a freak. A Deku, the one who can't do anything. He remembered the doctor's sterile office, the pitying look in his mother's eyes, her choked sobs as she apologized to him, as if his own dream was a burden she was sorry he had to bear. My best friend, he continued, the ghost of Bakugo's sneer flashing in his mind, tormented me for years. He told me I was worthless. He told me if I wanted a quirk so bad, I should take a swan dive off the roof and pray for one in the next life. Barry's weeping subsided, his eyes widening slightly. He was listening. And the worst part? Deku said, a single tear tracing a path down his own cheek. The worst part was that I believed him. I believed all of them. For 10 years I lived with that feeling you have right now. That feeling that I was a mistake. That my very existence was a source of pain, a burden on everyone around me. That the world would be better off if I just stopped trying. He looked at his own hands, clenching them into fists. But I couldn't stop. The one thing I had, the one thing no one could take from me, was this stupid, stubborn dream of being a hero, of saving people with a smile, just like my hero, All Might. He looked back up at Barry, his green eyes burning with an intensity that seemed to push back the oppressive darkness of the void. And then I met him. All Might. The greatest hero the world has ever known. And you know what he told me, after my dream had been crushed and trampled by everyone I knew? He told me I was a hero, too. Deku leaned in closer, his voice dropping to an earnest, passionate whisper. He didn't say it because I was strong. He didn't say it because I was special. He said it because he saw me run into danger, quirkless and terrified, to try and save the very same friend who had just told me to kill myself. Because my body moved before I had a chance to think. He reached out and this time, his hand didn't pass through. He placed it firmly on Barry's shoulder. The contact was solid, real. A point of connection in the heart of the void. That's what a hero is, Barry. It's not about being perfect. It's not about never making mistakes or never having regrets. It's about that moment. That instinct. The part of you that runs towards the fire, not away from it. The part of you that meddles when you don't have to. He quoted the man who was his entire world, his words a sacred creed. Meddling when you don't need to is the essence of being a hero. He looked around the void, at the phantom scenes of Barry's failures flickering at the edges of the darkness. You see these moments as your shame. Your failures. But you're looking at them all wrong. The paradox wants you to see the pain. But I see something else. He pointed to the ghostly image of the living room. I don't see a boy who lost his mother. I see a man who loves his mother so much that the pain of her loss still fuels him to save countless other families from that same pain. His gaze shifted to the scene of Flashpoint. I don't see a man who broke time out of selfishness. I see a son so full of love that he would risk reality itself just to see his mother smile one more time. It was a mistake, yes. But it was a mistake born from a hero's heart. He looked at the image of Savitar. And here. I don't see a hero who created a monster. I see a hero who is so defined by hope and compassion that even a twisted, broken part of himself, cast out and left to rot, is still obsessed with him. Savitar isn't proof of your darkness, Barry. He's proof of your light. He's a shadow that can only exist because your light is so blindingly bright. Every word Deku spoke was a hammer blow against the walls of Barry's psychic prison. The oppressive darkness of the void began to recede. The despair that had saturated the air began to thin, replaced by a fragile, flickering warmth. You failed, Deku said, his voice ringing with undeniable truth. You have failed. You will fail again. So have I. So will I. Every hero does. All Might failed. It's part of the job. But that's not what defines us. What defines us is what we do next. We stand up. We learn. We fight harder. Not for ourselves. But for the people who are counting on us. For Iris. For Cisco and Caitlin. For Wally. At the mention of Wally's name, a flicker of pain crossed Barry's face. But Wally is alive! Deku insisted, his grip on Barry's shoulder tightening. He's hurt. But he's alive because you got him out of there. The battle isn't over. You think giving up now honors his sacrifice? You think letting the paradox win is what he would want? The best way to honor the fallen, and the wounded, is to stand up and win the war for them. Deku stood up, pulling Barry to his feet with him. He was no longer just a boy from another dimension. He was a pillar of unwavering belief, a symbol of hope in its purest, most stubborn form. The paradox is wrong, Deku declared, his voice echoing in the rapidly brightening space. Motion isn't suffering. It's life. It's choice. It's the chance for a better tomorrow. It's the potential for joy, for love, for heroism. Stillness isn't peace. It's death. It's the end of all hope. And we are heroes. We don't deal in endings. We fight for one more day. For one more chance. For one more person saved. He took a step back, his own body beginning to glow with the gentle, green-gold light of One for All. The light wasn't aggressive, it was warm, inviting, and full of life. You are not a catalyst for tragedy, Barry Allen. You are a symbol of hope. You are the Flash. Now stop looking at the past. Look at me. Look at the future we have to fight for. And run with me. Barry stared at him. He saw not just a kid in a hero costume, but a reflection of the very ideals he had forgotten. He saw the unshakable, almost naive sincerity that he himself once had, before it was eroded by years of trauma and loss. Deku wasn't just giving him a pep talk, he was holding up a mirror, showing him the hero he still was, buried beneath layers of guilt. A single tear rolled down Barry's cheek, but this one was not of sorrow. It was a tear of release. Of gratitude. Of remembrance. He looked at his hands, and for the first time since Wally was injured, he let himself feel it. Not the guilt, not the failure, but the hum of the speed force. His connection. His lightning rod. He thought of Iris, of her smile, her strength, her unwavering belief in him. He thought of his team, his family, and he thought of this impossible boy, this hero from another world who had walked into his darkest moment and shown him the light. A tiny, golden spark flickered around his fist. Then another. Then, with a sound like a thunderclap, Barry Allen erupted in a torrent of brilliant, pure crimson and gold lightning. It was brighter, more powerful than Deku had ever seen it. It burned away the last vestiges of the psychic prison, shattering the ghostly memories into dust. The oppressive void dissolved, and they were back in the dark workshop at SDR Labs, the scarlet lightning still arcing between the shelves and tools before coalescing back into Barry. He stood tall, the slump of defeat gone, replaced by the poised, ready stance of a hero reborn. The exhaustion was still there, but it was now overshadowed by a burning, resolute fire in his eyes. He looked at Deku, and the gratitude in his gaze was immense. "Thank you, Midoriya," he said, his voice no longer hollow, but filled with a quiet, powerful conviction. "Thank you?" Deku simply smiled, a tired but triumphant expression on his face. He had done it. He hadn't thrown a single punch, but he had just won the most important battle of the war so far. He had saved the Flash. The door to the workshop swished open, revealing a frantic Cisco and Caitlin, their faces a mixture of fear and confusion. They had seen the wild energy fluctuations from the cortex and had feared the worst. Barry? What the hell was that? Cisco demanded, a tech gauntlet on his hand, ready for a fight. Barry looked at his friends, his family, and then back at Deku. A genuine, hopeful smile, the first one Deku had seen since the tragedy, graced his lips. That, Barry Allen said, his voice ringing with renewed purpose, was me remembering how to run. He clapped a hand on Deku's shoulder, no longer a stranger, no longer a kid, but a partner. A brother in arms. Their bond, which had been forged in the chaos of battle, was now tempered and solidified in the crucible of shared vulnerability and mutual respect. The paradox made a mistake, Barry said, his eyes gleaming with a strategic fire. It showed me my past to break me. But you, he said to Deku, you showed me my strength. And you've given me an idea. He strode out of the workshop and into the light of the cortex, Deku at his side. The war was far from over, but the tide had just begun to turn. It turned not with a cosmic blast or a super-speed punch, but with the quiet, unyielding power of a hero's heart, reminding another how to hope.